it's fascinating to me that how much you guys are getting done with 50 people.
Yeah.
And you kind of look at the industry, and Instagram got sold for like $1 zillion when they had, I think, 28 people.
Something like that.
So small companies can do impressive things, and
Yeah.
I think there's an important difference between small companies who, catch Mark Zuckerberg's attention when they're small, versus small companies who actually build a sustainable franchise in the way you've done and support millions of users. So you can look at companies like Craigslist, like Basecamp, who are very different and distinctive in this way. So, I'm sure you're tired of people asking you what's the secret, but I'm not really asking what's the secret, but I'm kind of asking, how does a 50-person company organize itself? What's your philosophy of work and organization to enable you to deliver so much, I guess, surface area in the world with so little apparent human effort?
Even 50 is too big. So our team sizes are 3 people. So any software functionality we're building, 3 people, 1 designer and 2 programmers. Sometimes it's 2 people, 1 designer, 1 programmer. So by keeping the teams really small, we can hit a lot of things at once, because with 3-person teams, you can maybe run 4 or 5 concurrent with 12 programmers. We have about 5 designers. Let's call it 3 or 4 or 5 concurrent projects that are small in scope, small enough that we can hold it in our head and deliver it within about 6 weeks. So we tend not to work on anything that takes more than 6 weeks at a time. Sometimes there's some special projects which go longer than that, but for the most part, everything's 6 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And it forces us to make things like figure out what the essence of something is and deliver it, because you can spend a lot of time polishing things that don't matter. You can spend a lot of time on edge cases that will never come up. You can spend a lot of time on edge cases that do come up but don't matter. Figuring out what really matters and what's really essential is, I think, it's not secret. It's just that's what I think we're really good at, and delivering on that, and then coming back later and doing a second version of it, or refining it later on.
Do you find you abandon often? Because obviously part of this is to be willing to say, well, that isn't working, or we can't achieve that. Or do you often put stuff aside and just go, yeah, well, that's not going to work?
Often, yeah. So even stuff we launch, we're like, not the best version that we had in mind, but it's functional. It's certainly acceptable. It's not crap. Like, we don't want to put crap out. But it's not the best version we could imagine, certainly. And sometimes that's okay if it's not front and center. Sometimes there's some front and center things that need to be really good, like inviting people to a Basecamp should be really good, because everyone goes through that when they set up a Basecamp. But moving a to-do list from one Basecamp to another, seldom important, but not that common. So it doesn't need to be great. I think the key is to figure out what level of fidelity things deserve, and then apply high fidelity to things that people use a lot, and lower fidelity things that people don't. So I always think about it as like, I always get this wrong. There's these 3 things. It's like the essential, the possible, and the sometimes, or something. I have these words wrong, but it's like thinking about the categories of things and where they fit helps you figure out what kind of fidelity and what kind of time you want to spend on something. So that's kind of how we do it, and how we manage to do a lot of things with a small team.
That makes sense. But of course, with such a small team, like adding to it must be a huge decision.
It is.
Yeah. So how do you go about finding people and screening them? Because you could almost have everyone interview somebody, but I'm guessing that's not what you do.
We do it. Our support team works that way. They actually, everyone kind of does, but it's not efficient. We're very careful. We hire a couple people a year, maybe. And the support team hires a few more, but developers and designers, 1 or 2 or 3, maybe at the most, a year. The key is to always look at real work. So when we're hiring a designer, for example, I'm going through this process right now. We'll talk to a bunch of people, we'll winnow it down to 5 finalists, then I give each of them a project. It's the same project. It's for a week. We pay them, so $1,500 for a week to do this project for us. And it's a sort of a challenge, it's real. It's actually about Basecamp. Like,
do they work with your team in doing the project?
No,
or it's
independently. And we do it this way because I just want to see what they're capable of. And I want to see them do it themselves. And because one of the tricks is you'll interview someone, they're like, yeah, I made Nike.com. I'm like, no, you didn't. You worked with 70 other people, right? I don't really know what you did. So let me give you a project. I'll give you sort of it's a sort of a big picture thing. So for example, the current one we're doing is, the current design challenge is, someone built or set up a Basecamp. It got too big and they want to split it into a few smaller Basecamps. How would you help them do that, design-wise? And so they have a week, and some of them have full-time jobs currently, so they got to find a few hours to do it, and they deliver something. I understand the decisions they made and why they made the decisions and all the whole thing. And that's the only way I've found to really judge someone's work and their abilities. And then we also, number one though, is they have to be of good character, they have to be a good person. So that's just about talking to them. It's like you pick your friends. There's no rules, you just know.
Okay.
You know if you like someone, you know if someone's good.
Yeah.
We do that with employees too.
Makes sense. And do you have a sense of, it's hard to talk in absolute numbers, but do you have a sense in your mind about how big the company could or should get? Like, do you think more than 100 is too big, or does that constrain you in ways?
We've always thought where we're at is the right size. So
have you always thought that at each size you've been at?
Yes.
Okay.
We're always like a little bit too small to do what we really want to do.
Right.
But I'd rather be that way than have people putting people to work on things that don't matter. I do feel like we're at 50 now and we have new challenges that we didn't have when we were at 20. And so I want to make sure that we have better internal processes to deal with that. Because communication just gets simply harder when you're a little bit bigger. I mean, it's still small, but bigger. Making sure everyone knows what everyone else is doing. Is that still important? There's some new questions that come up when you're at this size. But we're not stopping. So we're, a couple people a year, as long as we need them, we'll keep going that direction.
And this led you to knowyourcompany.com, I guess.
It did.
Right.
Yeah. Know Your Company is a product we built a couple years, maybe 2 years ago. I realized when we hit about 30 people, I'm the CEO of the company, I'm the last to know most things. And that's the case in most companies.
Yes.
Definitely is. The higher up you are, the less you actually know about what's going on.
But the more you think you know.
The more you think you know, and the more you're supposed to know.
Right.
It's a weird thing. So Know Your Company is a tool we built that polls the company on a regular basis every week with one of 52 different questions about, like, are there things we're doing things we aren't doing that we should be doing? Have we dropped the ball on anything recently? Have you been inspired by something lately? Are there promises we didn't keep that we said we would? How are the benefits? These kind of things. And it's just a way for everyone to speak up. And not everybody does, but people speak up. And I started learning a lot more about the company. So that was something we built because we hit a certain size. Now we're at a bigger size. It's still useful. We still use that tool as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's not anonymous, presumably. It's named.
It's not anonymous. We're very much against anonymous feedback. Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it's actually feedback if it's anonymous.
Yeah, I think that's right. It leads to just kind of anger and trolling.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And it's better. Like, the problem with anonymous feedback is that I don't know where to go with it.
Right.
So if there's a problem, I want to know about it. I want to talk to somebody about it. If I don't know who to talk to, then it kind of just fizzles out, and then it's just sort of, you get anxious about it. Well, is this really a problem? Who do I talk to about it? So anyway.
Yeah. And as you look at bigger companies, I mean, Workday is certainly a bigger company. Most software companies are bigger than you. Like, how applicable do you feel because the other thing about your approach is it's very relaxed. Most people aren't physically in the office most of the time.
Correct.
So it's kind of self-organizing. How applicable do you feel those principles are to a company that's 10, 50, 100 times that size?
What I think is valuable is some general principles, like figuring out what matters. That's still useful. Really thinking that stuff through. I think smaller teams, just in general, working on something, not necessarily a smaller company, but smaller teams. Right. I know some people who work at larger companies, and the default is like there's always 10 people involved in everything, just because that's just what happens.
Right.
And just be able to question that and go, could we do something with 3? Could we do 3 things with 3 each instead of 1 thing with 10? Like, things like that I think are really valuable things to think about. Also, every additional person you cut out of the loop just makes the communication between the people who remain really clear and clearer, and that's really valuable. A lot of time is simply spent telling people what's going on when you have a lot of people involved, and if you can trim that down, less communication is necessary. People just start to know things because they're involved with it. Yeah. So I think those lessons I think are valuable for any company.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I think one of the things we find is that however big you get, you want people to feel a sense of personal responsibility and ownership and empowerment to do what they're doing.
I think so.
And then trust them to do stuff. And if it breaks occasionally, so be it. If you're on average getting better, that's a good place to be in.
I agree.
One of my favorite, and if you know Robert Reich, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Labor, so he's written, I guess he's a Harvard or Princeton economist, and he's written some interesting stuff on the nature of work, and what's striking about the nature of work in modern society, in America particularly, is we don't actually make anything anymore. So back to our cars and watches thing, Reich calls us symbolic analysts. So we take in information in one form and process it and put it out in another form. In my existential moments, I sometimes find that dispiriting. Does that trouble you? Would you like to actually make something?
It does a little bit, actually. I think that's why I'm into gardening, to be honest, because I like to get in the dirt and like to play with some stuff that's actually growing and real. Right. I think might be why I like mechanical watches and cars in some ways, but I do worry about it, to be honest, because it feels like when we're all just at a desk looking at a screen, I feel like something's missing. I think there's a what other thing that's missing from that is I think a fundamental satisfaction at the end of the day that that something actually changed because you were involved in it. I think, if you're working on something physical and you align two gears because they were misaligned, like there's a fact now. This works today because you made it work. It's hard sometimes when you're working on software, especially when you're working on something that's going to take a year to do, that at the end of every day you can really look back and go, I did something today. A lot of times it's like, what did I do today?
Right.
And so I think that is missing, and I don't know if there's any way to get it back, but there's something missing from that. I think that I think is striking people nowadays. More fundamentally, you're seeing people embrace handmade stuff more, artisan stuff, whatever you want to call it.
The maker movement.
The maker movement, I think, comes out of that. I do.
Yeah.
I think people feel an emptiness there.
That's right. And I guess, just to finally wrap up, I think, you're identified somewhat as a philosopher of work in a sense. And
that's weird, but okay.
Okay, maybe that's, I've just made that up now.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but do you follow, or do you kind of look at other people who are similarly? So I guess, Joel Spolsky is, kind of from Fog Creek Software, had a very distinctive way of working. There was the guy whose name I've forgotten who started paying all his workers like $70,000.
Oh yeah, so that backfired though.
Yeah, it did backfire. Yeah. So I mean, are you conscious of being sort of in a sense a role model like those people? Is that something you're aware of? Do you?
I don't know. I mean, I just share what's on my mind, and people can take it or leave it, basically. I respect Joel a lot. I know Joel. I like what he's been doing for decades, sharing his way of working. It's different from our way, which is great. It's good that there's other ways, and I think that's what's important. That's what I do take pride in, is making sure people are aware that there's other ways to do things than just the way they've heard of necessarily, or that you can keep a company small and have a huge impact, or that you can work on something with 3 people, or you can do stuff in 6 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 1 week, or that you don't have to act the way everyone else acts, or you can build a company over the long term. Like I like that kind of stuff, which is why we've written books about it and we do a lot of speaking around it. Is it a responsibility? I don't know, but I just feel it's important to share. I've always felt that way. And so, just being another voice is important.
You never feel like you're making a decision that you feel is kind of wrong, but you're making it that way because it's consistent with your kind of...
I change my mind a lot. I disagree with myself constantly.
That's healthy.
Yeah, I think so. And so even just the way we work and the size we're at, sometimes like, are we the wrong size? Even decisions I'm making right now, I feel like I could take both sides of any of those decisions. And so I am constantly contradicting myself and disagreeing with myself. But the trend line is sort of what I'm watching. And I think over time, like I like where we're headed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Your inner monologue is effective then.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Super. Well, I think we've kind of taken enough of your time, Jason. So we greatly appreciate you coming in.
This is fun.
Best of luck in the Bay Area.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
for having me on.
Cheers, Jason.
Yeah, you bet.